Hey everybody, welcome to MetalTalk TV. My name is Brandon. I am really excited about our guest this episode. He is a world-renowned conductor that led the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra at S&M2, the recent collaboration with Metallica that will be released everywhere this Friday, August 28th. Please welcome to MetalTalk TV, Edwin Outwater. Edwin, how are you?
Hey, good. How are you?
I am very good. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on MetalTalk TV. It's a real pleasure to have you.
Nice to be here. Can't believe it's this Friday, this record. Wow.
I know it's fun because it's for us Metallica fans. It was quickly in movie theaters, and then we were waiting and waiting, waiting. But now all of a sudden it's here, and it's gone by really fast the last month or two with the little snippets that have been released by the band and whatnot.
Yeah, I hope you enjoy it. I'm pretty excited about what they've come up with in this re-edited version, and the audio obviously will be more worked out after putting a movie out in 1 month was pretty amazing what they did, but we've done a lot more since then.
Well, I know everybody's really excited to hear it. From what I have heard, it sounds fantastic. I am curious though to kind of travel back in time with you for a little bit, when your musical journey began and how you discovered that you wanted to be a conductor.
Oh, I had a interesting musical journey, I guess. I grew up in LA, and my grandmother worked for Ella Fitzgerald for a long time, and my father worked for Warner Records in the engineering kind of side of things. And so I was around kind of rock and roll and jazz more than classical. But around age 13, I got a bass in my hands through the public schools there and a great teacher. And then I became obsessed with classical music. And through high school, I was playing, orchestral bass quite a bit. Had an electric bass, but never found the right group of friends to start a band with. It was an idea. And by the time I got to university, I had gotten the conducting bug and was trying to, get groups of friends together and try things out. But for me, conductors are like puzzle solvers. They love all the different aspects and the multitasking. And I kind of realized at a young age, my brain kind of worked that way. So I was drawn to it. But it's very presumptuous to be a conductor, as you know. It's stand on the box and wave your arms.
Well, it's funny you said, because I am a graduate of music college. I went to Berkeley in Boston, Massachusetts.
Right.
And I only said because my understanding of what conducting was, I found when I got there and took conducting courses, was very preliminary. I sort of had this notion that a conductor is any musician who just stands and kind of, keeps time, gives some cues. But when you actually study, you realize very quickly there's a real art form to doing it very well. And it's kind of a separate skill set. And I'm curious how you sort of, how you see your role as a conductor and how you sort of, in terms of both rehearsals and performances, and how you approach it.
Well, conducting has two parts. There's definitely the coaching and direct, very similar to a stage director or a coach of a sports team, that you organize everything, you run the rehearsals, you make a lot of the artistic decisions on behalf of the group. The difference with so that's one part of conducting training, is just having the ears and the kind of ability to fix things, in an orchestra or to mold the sound the way you want in rehearsal. But then the other aspect, obviously, is the physical aspect, because unlike a sports coach or a stage director, you don't walk on stage. Those guys don't walk on stage or on the field with their players. They sit on the sidelines, whereas the conductor is up there in the performance. So That's when all the hand stuff becomes very important, because a good orchestra can read very, very subtle signals from you, in your hands. And that can cause spontaneous things to happen, or the performance to go in a different direction than the rehearsals did. And so the two aspects are that behind the scenes aspect, and then the technical, and just like any instrument, there's kind of a technique of conducting and moving your hands and making things kind of come alive that way.
Right. And I remember the thing that stood out to me the most when it was really first introduced to me was how expressive it is. It has to be just as expressive as picking up an instrument and making music with that. With, you know, you want to. It was taught to me, like, if you're just sort of standing there and doing this, you want to, you know, if it's loud, you want it to really show with your arms and your body. And it's, you know, the whole body language aspect of it was the part that really stood out to me when I first started studying it myself.
Definitely. And like, I'm, you know, for me, I'm trying to get every possible expression in the physical, you know, work. And because frankly, orchestras hate stopping. Just like in a band practice or whatever, you don't want to stop. You don't want to like keep talking and talking. You want to play and work it out with as few words as possible. So the gestures are really, you know, almost your survival mechanism as a conductor.
Yeah.
You don't want to stop. 100 people can get bored really fast with that.
Yeah, I remember that from my classes. You know, if the baton stopped, the group was instructed to stop, you know, and excellent. So I'm curious, you mentioned you were listening to some rock and jazz and then got into classical. Who were some of your favorite artists growing up? What really led you down for both rock, jazz, and then what ultimately pulled you in for classical?
I think musically, I was kind of a lucky, like, you know, I'm 49, but because my father worked for a record company, I was kind of a Spotify kid, you know, or a YouTube kid before that. So I could basically listen to music for free. So it was kind of early on. I remember I asked for I liked kind of hard rock and like Van Halen and Zeppelin, and those were the records I was asking to be brought home to me. Then I got, you know, I went to a concert around 10, and I asked my dad what, you know, I wanted to go to a rock concert. He said, "What do you want to see?" I said, "I don't know. Like, what's good?" He said, "You want to see like blood and explosions and snakes?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll see that." And so he took me to Alice Cooper at the Greek Theater in LA, which is awesome. And then, as you know, I kept exploring music, and I became I got into punk and new wave, like the more stripped down stuff. Very 80s kid from West LA. It's not, you know, it's kind of what a lot of us listen to over there.
Right.
At the time. And so everything from like Devo to like Black Flag or, you know, X or Talking Heads and things like that. Kind of a mix of that kind of K-rock from the 80s world.
Right.
And then also into Bowie and into kind of, I just went deeper and deeper into weirder and stranger music, basically. Zappa, all of that. Just because I could keep hearing it. And then classical music, I picked up something, and jazz the whole time. I mean, I was going to see Ella or Oscar Peterson or, you know, all these kind of, especially older generation jazz acts, but sometimes new ones. And then classical music, I just, at 14 or 13, I picked up a cassette tape of a Mozart symphony, and somehow the music made sense to me in a way that it hadn't up until that point. So I started to hear what it was trying to do, but it took a long time for me, you know, considering like, I think my parents wanted me to listen to more classical when I was younger, and I kind of resisted. But then it was a revelation. It's like, oh, that's what that music means, you know?
Right.
And that's why it's powerful, and that's why it's hard to do. And that's, you know, it kind of all clicked. And then I became really obsessed. And that was when I really started getting good at the bass and at an instrument at the same time. So it kind of all, it's funny how music works. It just all clicks together in weird ways, biologically or mentally or nature, nurture, who knows, you know, what you're exposed to and how it all adds up into like what you love or what you love to do.
Totally. I had my parents visiting me not that long ago, and I was playing music, and they're like, "Are you like playing this because we're here?" Or I'm like, "No, this is just like my music. I'm just like, this is all the stuff we listen to." I was like, "Well, I heard it growing up. I, you know, and at the time I was, you know, Metallica, Megadeth, but then you go back and you sort of rediscover all the songs and kind of learn to love it in your own way, you know?"
Yeah. I mean, and, you know, most open-minded listeners don't really care about genre that much. They may have a music that means a lot to them based on what they heard growing up, or, you know, that were emotional or pivotal experiences. But, you know, for most of us, we're exposed to so much music now that we can pretty easily venture into other genres, you know, without sweating it or worrying about it. And there's kind of less, I don't know, there's less, I have to like this music and not that. It doesn't seem to be, it used to be more, right?
Yeah,
but now it's less, I think.
I agree with that. And there are so many artists now who just sort of bridge the gaps between all these different genres because, they might experiment with, world music or rock, or it's just sort of a hodgepodge of styles now, which I think is really great.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a very like wide, listener and love living in all sorts of worlds. And I'm a kind of musician that can jump into, from a classical musician into a Metallica situation. And I do love that, being able to do that. It's like, it's so fun. And, for me, I don't pretend to be a rock musician or a jazz musician. I'm just a fan and I love it. I mean, I can play along with it, but, I'm a classical musician who can work with those people, when the time comes. I mean, that's where my skill is as a musician, is classical, but,
Right.
everything kind of blends, and that can add a lot to a rock experience and vice versa.
Sure. So when did Metallica first appear on your radar? Were you familiar with them, growing up, or it sort of,
Yeah,
when did you just sort of, do
kind
you
of.
remember hearing them?
Yeah, MTV,
Yeah.
Black Album, and then I got more into kind of the earlier stuff. Like I remember specifically listening to Master of Puppets and Justice for All, up and down the California coastline, because I was commuting from Santa Monica to Santa Barbara a lot, and driving hours and hours. I love those two records. I played them over
Yeah.
and over again. And then, and I'd always been aware of Metallica. I saw the documentary when it first came out, and then, but they're kind of a part of my diet, but not the main part.
Right.
But they were like an exemplar of like that kind of rock. And for me, there were times in my life, when I needed that feeling, and
Hmm.
I definitely provided it. And then once I got into the project, which was March 2019. Since I was going to be kind of on stage with these guys, I really felt I needed to understand them much more deeply. And so spent months and months listening to lots of metal, and enjoying it, like
Yeah.
from, the other big four bands back to Black Sabbath, and forward to like new, like, neo thrash bands like Power Trip or things like that. And,
Awesome.
and some of the other, like High on Fire,
Right.
and kind of getting a kind of a feeling of the whole universe, how everything connects, and so I felt pretty knowledgeable and pretty comfortable in the world by the time we got into the process. And it was if you've ever done that, like explored a new genre of music or one that you didn't know, and just like really went out, it's quite rewarding. You learn a lot, and
Sure.
it adds a lot to your life to know more about those bands.
I totally agree. I love or choosing a specific artist and be like, I'm just going to do a deep dive into this
Yes.
catalog, and you sort of work your way through. I did that like a year or two ago with the Beach Boys. I was like, I'm just going to go back, listen to all the albums, and just sort of like work your way through until
So that is a journey. The Beach Boys. Oh my God.
it was a journey. I mean, I maxed out not long after Pet Sounds, I will admit.
Yeah.
But
Oh, I love some of that. I love some of that like Surf's Up, and
yeah.
like, oh, it's like so weird and, burnout and existential, and like, but it's still so, and it's very sad, a lot of it. It's
Yeah.
really, Late Beach Boys is incredible for me.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm curious, we was the original S&M concert from 1999 on your radar at all? What was your
A little
familiarity?
bit, yeah. It was on my radar in a funny way. I don't know if I'd seen the whole thing. My friends in the San Francisco Symphony talked about it. When I first came to the orchestra in 2001, it wasn't too long after S&M1,
Right.
and it was very much in the conversations as an awesome experience the orchestra had, and people, like some of my younger friends in the orchestra, would play me their little oboe solo with the No Leaf Clover, and they're like so proud of it, and so it was very, like, I knew about it, and often the extent to which Metallica is so powerful, like or the fan base is so powerful, you would kind of be in a cab, or I guess at that time you'd be in a cab, or later an Uber, and kind
Yeah.
of talking about that you're a conductor, and half the people would say, you know, a specific piece of classical music they liked, or a specific composer like Beethoven, Mozart, but the other half of the people would say like S&M2 is like the coolest orchestral thing I've ever seen. You know about it. So like even in classical musician, it's like half of like, you know, what I ran into was a S&M2 thing. And I like just before the project, you know, I was in the Uber in LA and I was telling the Uber driver I was gonna, you know, be a part of this, and he already like got me out of the car and took a picture and like, you know. So it was,
awesome.
but it really, you know, it impacted so many people, and that was why I was so excited, because I'd had all these like taxi cab conversations with people and knew kind of how the project had reached people, like so many people in such a positive way, and so I was really honored to carry the torch, obviously.
I think it was Lars who recently said it was probably the interview they recently did on the Howard Stern show. And he was talking about how the first go around, they were the younger guys. And now this go around, they were the older guys. And there are so many more members of the orchestra who were like, yeah, I grew up listening to Metallica.
Yeah. I mean, not least of which, you know, Scott Pingle, who played that amazing bass solo of Anesthesia, I mean, was a real fan and like, you know, spent so many hours, you know, getting that, you know, electric bass set up right and the pedals and learning, you know, Anesthesia and adding it. So that kind of affection is, there are definitely plenty of Metallica fans in the San Francisco Symphony. And I would say beyond that, even the, you know, some of them have played it before, played both shows. They all, you know, and the band is so respectful and appreciative of the orchestra. And so it's such a positive experience and an unusual experience for orchestral musicians to be rock stars. I mean, they do tour the world. I mean,
right.
San Francisco Symphony goes on tour to Europe or Asia all the time, and they get incredible ovations, you know, playing with Michael Tilson Thomas but it's just, you know, it's different.
Right.
Rock energy is different.
Well, that brings up a couple questions I have for you. It's funny you mentioned Scott because he's actually going to be a part of a MetalTalk in my podcast, Metallicast. We're going to co-host a live stream this Friday, the 28th.
Oh, great.
And so Scott's going to be on along with Doug Ryeth, the principal harpist of the orchestra.
Yes.
So we're going to be doing a live chat on Facebook and YouTube, and the audio will come out on my podcast, Metallicast, after the fact. So I was actually going to ask you a couple related questions to what you're saying, including sort of how did some of these pieces come to be? For me as a fan, the first half of the show is great, but that second act, for me personally, I just truly love with the experimentation with the classical pieces, and then going into the arrangement of the Unforgiven 3, where it's all orchestra except for James on vocals. And then, of course, you mentioned Scott doing the solo for Anesthesia, pulling teeth. So I was just sort of curious where some of those things came to be. For example, the Scythian Suite and the Iron Foundry, the classical pieces that were performed. Whose sort of brainchild was that, and how did the band react to doing that?
I think the initial S&M2 creative conversations took place between Lars and Michael Tilson Thomas. And I think had he not had heart surgery that summer, he might have had a bigger creative role in the show, Michael.
Yeah.
And even so, that was kind of his zone. But one thing they agreed on in the initial conversations before I was even brought on board is that instead of just, you know, playing Metallica songs, both Michael and Lars wanted the orchestra to shine more, to have something to play on its own, to involve the players playing Metallica songs, and to flip kind of go do the opposite of what we were doing mostly that day, which is the orchestra learning Metallica songs. There was the kind of the musical challenge for Metallica to learn one classical song,
right,
in the midst of it, which was the Iron Foundry. And so I think I knew that was, and, you know, soon after, when I was kind of put essentially in charge of the rest of the project, you know, from the symphony side, because Michael was going through other stuff and working on other stuff, and was actually having a planned heart surgery that summer. I kind of went and recruited people, you know, and Scott, like the minute he heard there was an email to the orchestra, and the minute that email went out, Scott was like texting me about, you know, what he was working on. So very eager. I was like, well, this will be easy, you know. And I would say the band is, you know, they loved it. I mean, he auditioned for them. He'll tell you about it, but in HQ, and I was sitting there, just they're all like in a small circle, like when you could put in, you know, listening to him play. And it was very emotional, obviously, for the band to hear that, you know,
I'm sure
for you know, all the reasons all the fans know and about Cliff Burton, and it was really one of the highlights. But I think that was partly my job, was to find orchestra pieces and orchestra musicians. Scott was the one that kind of came through in the concert, obviously. And then I think Michael and I discussed which pieces to choose. So there were several pieces. You could have done a bit of Ride of the Valkyries, you know, the Apocalypse Now. Right. You could have done the second movement of Shostakovich's 10th Symphony, which is a really fast 4-minute, you know, ripper for orchestra. And we chose Scythian Suite because it's short, it's 4 minutes, and it's like, it is very heavy. Like it's famously brutal and heavy and kind of perfect. So I think Michael and I were kind of, he came up with some ideas, and we kind of batted them back and forth between us. And then Iron Foundry is a piece that Michael kind of discovered, and he always busts it out as an encore. It's a really weird piece, and I fell in love with it like the minute he introduced me to it. And so I don't know, it's probably his idea, and I said, oh, the Iron Foundry would be great because it kind of repeats. Right. You know, it's kind of almost like a rock. It has riffs and it repeats for an amount of time, and so the band can kind of learn it quickly, and sure. And it kind of works in that way, in a rock song kind of way. So it's not a famous piece of music. It's a really obscure piece of classical music. It's totally niche, and most classical musicians don't know it. And so I think the irony now is, of course, that it's mega famous, or will be, you know, when everything comes out on Friday.
I was not overly familiar with either of those pieces at the time, but I remember hearing the Scythian Suite, and, you know, just like you said, I was like, if this was arranged for guitar, bass, drums, this is a Metallica song.
Yeah, exactly. So we felt that way. And Scythian Suite is not, I mean, it's by Prokofiev. It's a much more famous composer, but it's not a super popular piece either.
Yeah.
So, you know, these are like deep cuts of classical music, which made it even more fun, I think. You know, I thought it would have been cheesy to do da 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 da. I mean, maybe they would have liked it, but I don't know.
Well, I'm sure it was a bigger thrill for the orchestra members to play something that perhaps they had not played before, or at least not often.
Yeah, well, they played it because but I think, it was cool for them to play it in an arena. And also, frankly, we had to choose pieces that worked in that weird formation that we were sitting in a circle, which is not how orchestras sit at all. And so Scythian Suite's not super fast, which made it easier for it to hold it together, considering we were so spaced so weirdly apart from each other on that stage. I mean, that was definitely like the practical consideration.
Which I was going to ask you about just in general, because you'd mentioned before the audience there is obviously a little louder than your typical symphony performance, and you have the unique setup of you know, the circular setup with the band and the orchestra. So how do you prepare for that, for what you need to do in terms of dealing with perhaps extra audience noise and just a different layout?
I mean, that was the adventure. You don't know until you do it. I mean, I had in-ears, you know, and we had a lot of rehearsal time in that setup. We had 3 rehearsals in the circular setup before. So, and 2 were in the Cow Palace, which is another arena in San Francisco. So we actually played in this arena for 2 days before we went over to the Chase Center. And they built the setup, tore it down, and built it back up, which is kind of amazing. But it made us so comfortable that we had like lived in that and kind of troubleshot various audio and visual problems that circular arrangement created. So, you know, almost everyone could see me from the podium, but a few could not. And then we had small TV screens, you know, in front of the percussion particularly.
Yeah.
If you look carefully in the movie, you'll see little screens of me, you know, conducting the people who can't see me directly.
It's incredible the amount of logistics that goes into, you know, what was ultimately a 2-day performance.
Yeah. Well, we knew it would last a long time, and
right, sure.
I was in very close contact with Greg Fiddleman as we put the thing together, and you know, the two of us live were making sure everyone was comfortable, and for me, my job, a lot of it is psychological for both the band and the orchestra to make everyone feel, okay, it's cool, like we're good, you know, it's gonna be fine. If there's a problem, we'll fix it. For the orchestra, we're not gonna blow your ears out. We have like hearing protection, and we're gonna warn you, you know, if we turn the sound up, so you're not, because they're not used to that. And frankly, they're less protected than Metallica is. They don't, you know, most of the musicians did not have in-ears. They had earplugs and then like one headphone, you know, so it was challenging for them for sure.
Wow. I'm curious now that you have had some time to live with this project, what do you look back on, and what was sort of like the personal highlight for you from S&M2?
I don't know, man. It was such a long, it was putting it together really, and just imagining it and seeing it come to life. I mean, just the original conversations we had about the stage setup, trying to figure it out. Like I made one kind of stage design suggestion to shrink the Metallica circle in the middle where they play and put the pathways out, you know, which allowed the players to see each other better. And that was, I mean, I was so proud of that, because that like one decision made the whole thing work 100 times better. And so it was like everything from like engineering to song selection to, you know, moments in the concert, like just reacting to the crowd, like doing iconic pieces like No Leaf or One, you know, which the S&M version is so beautiful. And yeah, it was just, the whole thing was a career highlight. And the team it was such a positive experience. Everyone was so supportive and out for the adventure, and the band was great. The Metallica crew, which is vast, they're like some of the most talented people you can imagine. I mean, they just and it feels like a family, like over on their side and our side. And it got the way everyone got along. It just went really well. It was, and you hear it. I mean, it's reflected in the kind of the final product that everyone is just kind of going for it in a way that's really exciting. Like the vibes were really good, you know, on stage.
I think you can hear from what I have heard from S&M2, there's a lot of energy. And what I've liked about the recordings I've heard is that I think it really captures the band live, despite the with the orchestra. It's just so much energy coming off every musician on that stage. It sounds really lively and fun. Yeah,
I mean, I would just kind of, some of those songs are kind of breathtaking. They just have that little edge, that live edge, that a little bit leaning forward and pushing ahead a little bit. You know, we were not on a click. I mean, really at all. For most, I mean, there was maybe a starting click, and then it went the way it went. And so it's that kind of live excitement is there. And one that orchestras can, you know, go faster or go slower or adjust the tempo. I mean, we play opera.
Yeah.
We're one of the miracles about orchestras is you know, as 100 people, we can switch tempos on a dime or do these subtle adjustments.
Sure.
That the band could do. Like if we feel it kind of going, we'll go. And that, I think that also was something I knew how to do with the orchestra, and we trusted just to follow and to go on the roller coaster ride. And I think that came out really, really well in the recording.
I'm curious, besides S&M2, what is a recent project of yours that you're really proud of that you would love for people watching MetalTalk or listening on Metallicast to check out?
I've done, oh man.
I know you've done so much.
Yeah,
maybe something from the last year.
The last year, well, there's COVID, so I got...
Sad example, maybe from the last 2 years.
I mean, some really fun projects is often I am pulled into these these kind of really big projects that are multidisciplinary. So one thing at the Kennedy Center, I worked with the soprano Renee Fleming on a whole thing about sound health, like about neuroscience and
Oh, wow.
music, and just with a whole amazing group of musicians. I also helped Wynton Marsalis and his Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra create a jazz version of Pictures in an Exhibition of Mussorgsky, which we did in Chicago, which was just unbelievable. And all his guys in his band are composers, you know, great jazz. And so each of his band members composed a jazz version of Pictures, and he alternated. So I kind of helped produce that. So I love these producing projects. Right this week I'm in Los Angeles. I'm actually working with Kirk on a project that we had planned that was postponed by the pandemic, but we both love horror movies. You know,
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So we kind of bonded over that. So we had a concert planned with the Vancouver Symphony, which was like a horror orchestra concert with like all sorts.
Wow. That sounds awesome.
And so we're recording it'll happen at some point, but we're recording this week, that kind of thing. So this is a Metallica week for me as well.
It's funny because I was, you know, to tie in with your love for kind of bigger projects. I saw this random video online of Ben Folds where he basically improvises a song for orchestra in 10 minutes, not even realizing that until I was watching the video that I was like, oh, that's Edwin Outwater.
I work with Ben a lot, actually. I love Ben. He's he loves orchestras as well, and he'll tour just like piano and orchestra and drummer, and I'm one of his conductors he likes working with. So and Ben's always a joy. So whenever you kind of, if he calls, I'll come and do the show. It's really fun. And he is really creative. He does that orchestra improv thing, and he has a series at the Kennedy Center that kind of combines, you know, all these different kind of people with classical musicians. So he's doing a lot of work on that kind of hybrid front as well.
Awesome. And I have a favorite horror movie.
God, it's like so many. I'm like,
I save all the tough questions for the end. So
I don't know if it's a horror movie. I love this movie called Night of the Hunter, which is with Robert Mitchum, and it's about a homicidal preacher who chases these kids, who kills the kids' parents and then chases them through the South. And it's like it's a kind of almost like those German expressionist like Fritz Lang movies, you know. And but it's really American. It was directed by Charles Laughton, who is a great actor. His only movie. Music is incredible. It's really, to me, probably my favorite movie, and it is essentially a horror movie.
I was looking in preparation for this interview. I was looking at what you've done with the San Francisco Symphony, especially. And one thing that stood out to me that seems like a really unique event was, and I believe it's been recurring for a few years, obviously pre-pandemic, was the Holiday Gaiety event. Well, can you explain what that is all about? It seems like a really unique event.
Well, someone had asked me to do a holiday concert for adults, essentially.
Yeah.
You know, because all the holiday concerts, you know, you bring your kids. Like, what about the people without kids? And like, you know, and like
trot out Santa Claus again, and
like the other thing. So there was a drag queen called Peaches Christ in San Francisco, who is kind of also is a horror icon, you know, kind of like an Elvira drag person and cult films and stuff. And she and I kind of put together like we thought, what if we did a you know, like those Andy Williams or like Judy Garland holiday shows from the 50s where someone like knocks at the door and comes through. Yeah. And like, so it was all like comedy written out, and the guests would be like a lot of the RuPaul people, like Bob the Drag Queen would come in, or Thorgy Thor, who's a classical musician, and then like famous singers. We had Jane Lynch, you know, and Anna Gasteyer, and all these great, and Sandra Claus. We didn't have Santa Claus. So, but it was like we were going to do this was going to be our 4th year, and in fact the concert. The Halloween concert with Kirk was going to have Peaches as well. And so it was based on those horror movies from the 60s where people walk in like they wear like those velvet red jackets and like ascots, and then there would have been like a demon in the orchestra, and then Kirk would have made a big guess. It was all going to get kind of wild. So horror and
awesome.
Yeah, it's a strange world. It would have been like a horror drag classical concert.
Well,
horror drag classical rock comedy. Yeah, that's
well, I'm really looking forward to seeing that when it sees the light of day in this in a post-pandemic world, whenever
now
that
we want
is.
to tour it. Do you see what you're missing now? You got to get back to work.
Which I guess leads me to my sort of final question, with what can we expect from you sort of for 2020, 2021 with the pandemic going on? Are you doing a lot more like planning behind the scenes stuff, or?
Yeah, we don't know when we're going to be back on stage.
Yeah.
Well, the San Francisco Symphony. And it's so complicated because, and I don't think Metallica really knows either, or anybody.
Nobody knows.
And, in some parts of the world are ahead of other parts of the world. I recently was appointed music director of the San Francisco Conservatory, which is, the big music school in San Francisco. And so we are going to be doing concerts in small groups and streaming them. So I think for me, I don't just want to do a concert and film it and put it out there. I have some like filmmaking and creative ideas to kind of share that music in a different way since we're not live, and interspersing it with interviews or reflecting on the time we're living in. And so I think hopefully through that portal, in a sense, the conservatory portal, you'll see some new stuff from me. But it's really, this week we're in this recording project, but it's been months and months of no performing. A lot of these talks, which I really love that the conversations are still going, and not only S&M related talks, but just other classical appearances and kind of powwows. So, but we're all kind of itching to be back. But the conservatory is at the moment my kind of online presence will be directed through there in the months ahead.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on all of your successes, especially with your most recent projects and the conservatory. And I know I am very much looking forward to seeing what lies ahead. And of course, I'm looking forward to getting the final product of S&M2 and watching the Blu-ray and all that good stuff, and hearing that final mix. And it was just, when I saw it in movie theaters, it was really beautifully done, and it just sounded phenomenal with everything mixed together. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how they made it better.
We did. I spent a lot of time listening to it and looking at it in January, and I think it's really a beautiful kind of commemoration of what happened there.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Edwin. I really enjoyed this talk.
All right, me too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.